guys, welcome back, Lingaroo Troop. It's great to have you with me today. Today, we're going to be talking about the COVID-19 crisis. And I know it's not new to you. You've seen it everywhere by now, in every news headline, in every post or every other post on Facebook. But we're going to be talking about the language of this crisis, and not necessarily even just this crisis, but how do we talk to our kids about crises? How do we talk to our kids about diagnoses or other tragedies in our lives? So that's what we're going to be talking about today, the language of crisis and how to communicate with our kiddos. Don't go away. Guys, like I said, welcome back. It's great to have you with us again. This group, this Lingaroo Troop, is growing daily, and it's so exciting to see and so encouraging to me to be connecting with you guys, you parents, those of you who even now more than ever are on the front lines, right? Those of you who last Monday found out that you're now a homeschooler, like I did. So we're going to be connecting even more today around this idea of the COVID-19 crisis. And I know we're hearing a lot about it. For some of us, it might even feel like it's ad nauseum, right? We may even be kind of tired of talking about it or tired of hearing about it. But I want to talk about our kiddos, especially our kiddos with a language delay or disability, or our kiddos on the autism spectrum, our kiddos who may be having a hard time, and we may not have even thought about that yet, or we might not realize the extent of that yet. But we're going to be talking about that. How do we talk about crises with our kids? Or as I mentioned in the intro, it's not just the COVID-19 crisis, right? This can apply to anything. Maybe it's that diagnosis that someone in your family got, or a joblessness, or whatever it is. You know, life has a tendency to just kind of come at us. And I want to kind of give you guys some ideas today of how we can talk about this or any crisis with our kiddos. I know in our home that there is certainly a tenor of unease, right? Especially in my youngest one. There's been a lot of emotionality, a lot of stress that I'm hearing her communicate to me, but then also that I'm just picking up in little subtle ways that she's reacting to things in a different way. And for some of our kiddos, right, if they do have language difficulties, this change or this disruption in schedule, we were going to school, now we're not, mom and dad used to be gone and now they're home. This is a lot to process. And maybe for you or I, we have the ability to talk about it, to air our feelings, to get it off our chest, or to read a newspaper article or a devotional or something that will kind of calm the storm, right? But for our kiddos, especially again, a lot of our kiddos that have difficulties with language, that might not be an option. So I want to talk about how are we talking to our kiddos? And I want to give you 5 things to think about as you're talking to your kiddos in the coming weeks. Okay, so let's dive in. This first idea is just to assume an audience, right? Our kids are always listening. And I know sometimes it's easy for us as parents to kind of, they don't know what's going on, or they're not even thinking about this. But I would argue that that's not true. I would argue that they are very much hearing things about this. They are very much listening to our conversations, and they are an ever-present audience, both to us and to things they see on the television. My 2 older ones watch a lot of YouTube videos, and I have even heard, as I'm sitting at the dining room table working, I can overhear the conversations, whether it's the Daily Dose of Internet or Dude Perfect or Team Edge or whatever it is that they're watching. There's a lot of talk on those snippets, those videos about coronavirus, about COVID-19, right? As you're talking to your spouse, what are your children overhearing? And is it enough to actually provide them enough information to have a solid grasp on what's going on? Or is it just enough to kind of induce a little bit of fear and a little bit of anxiety? So remember that and think about that you always have an audience. The second thing along those lines is that I want you to avoid jokes and sarcasm. right? Again, it's easy for us as adults, as parents, to try to make light of the situation sometimes, or to try to bring in a little bit of humor to help lighten the load. I know I've seen a lot of really funny memes on Facebook that my husband and I have been talking about and sharing those back and forth. But again, as we're assuming an audience in that first point, I want you to think about avoiding jokes and sarcasm. Little kiddos especially, they just don't get it, right? They don't understand sometimes. It's not as easy for them to understand when we're joking, even if we know that we are. I'll give you an example in my own life. I had, a while back, I was having some issues with my blood pressure. And I jokingly, not that it's a joke, but I jokingly kind of said to my husband, am I going to have a stroke or what? And I just kind of said that because I could feel my blood pressure was super high. I didn't really actually think I was going to be having a stroke or a TIA or anything medically diagnosable. It was more just something that I was saying, again, not to make light of that or not to make a joke of that actual medical situation, but it certainly wasn't something that I legitimately actually thought was happening at the time. I just said it kind of as a way to bring levity to the situation for myself, but my daughter overheard it. Right? She overheard it and she knew exactly what I was saying. And again, I didn't assume that she did. So I was like, oh, you don't even know what I'm talking about, right? That was my response. And she said, yes, I do. And then she went on to explain to me what that would mean and what that medical situation would be. So again, avoid those jokes and sarcasm as you're assuming an audience with your little kiddos. Okay, so the third thing I want you to think about as you're dealing with this or any crisis is to use descriptive language, but then also to make available descriptive language for your kiddos. Let me tell you what I mean by that. As we're entering into conversations, as we're entering into discussions about crises with our kiddos, we want to think about language that describes it in ways that they're going to understand, right? Age-appropriate level. So for example, if I was to talk to a young child about COVID-19, I might not use the term COVID-19 or even coronavirus. I might liken it or use descriptions to kind of liken it to something that they might understand and might be able to get their head around. I might reference a time when they had the flu. Right? Do you remember that time when you just felt rotten and you were on the couch and you were kind of sweaty, but then you'd get really cold and again, what am I describing? Fever, right? But I'm not saying when you had a fever because they might not know exactly what that term means. When you cough really bad and describe some of these symptoms to them without using some of these bigger medical terms. And then also making sure that the descriptive language is available for your kiddos. I'm specifically talking to those of you whose kiddos may use a communication board or a device. I know there are a lot of great resources available to you guys as parents right now. I've put some down in the chat below. There are a lot of great ways to put this descriptive language into the hands of your kiddos. Because again, when you think about how you and I are processing through this right now, a lot of that, I know for me at least, surprise, surprise, is done verbally, right? I'm talking about this a lot with my husband, with my kids, with my friends, right? So we want to avail our kiddos of that as well, to give them access to language that is helpful and is super descriptive of how they are maybe feeling physically during this time, but also how they are feeling emotionally as well. Which brings me to my next point. One of the things I really focus on here at Lingaroo is not just labeling objects or pointing out things, right? We want to make sure that we are modeling all kinds of language for our kiddos. And I think now is a great time to do one of the things that I would think is always important to do, but to model language of hope and to model language of healthy emotions. Again, kind of to give you a glimpse into our world, the other day my daughter came up and she sat on my lap and she just looked sad, and so we started down this trail of what's going on? How are you feeling? Are you sad? And she said, I don't know, I'm just sad. And I said, well, tell me about that. Tell me about how you're feeling. And we talked about it. Or I would model my feelings, And I said, sometimes I just, right now, because you guys aren't in school and mommy and daddy are here at home, and, and I'm kind of almost like a social story. I don't know if you're familiar with those in speech therapy, but kind of a social story where I'm telling her a story about my feelings and how I just feel a little off, right? I just feel a little bit out of sorts. And this is kind of new and it's kind of different. And it makes me feel kind of weird and unsettled, right? So again, modeling it for her at her age level, but using my own feelings as an example, right? So I'm not necessarily putting the pressure on her to talk about it right then and there, but modeling my emotions and letting her kind of come in up underneath that and identify with the ones that she wants, but then it might also model for her some ways to think about or to talk about her own feelings. And then finally, guys, I would just really encourage you to model consistency through visual schedules for your kiddos. Going back to this whole being thrown into homeschooling thing, there is a lot of newness. And I know at school, there's more regimentation, right? They go to this class and then they go here and then they go here, and then everything is kind of almost prescriptive for them, right? And now, I don't know about your house, but right now it feels like a little bit of a free-for-all here at mine. So if you can incorporate some schedules, incorporate some visual schedules with some pictures that are going to show, now we're going to do breakfast, and then we're going to do this art activity, and then we're going to do our math homework, and then we're, and you kind of lineate or put it on a linear scale for them, a visual scale, so that they can see what's coming next, and that will really help them to know what's coming, to kind of prep their minds, and to provide some structure for them and for you as you're navigating through this time. So guys, again, regardless of what stress or strain or crisis it is that you're navigating through, I think if you think about some of these things, if you think about the fact that our kiddos are always listening, right? That we need to avoid sarcasm and jokes. We need to use descriptive language and put it into terms that they can understand and that they can grasp and that means something to them, while also giving them language in whatever form to communicate their thoughts and feelings during this time as well. And then you're going to want to model hope and healthy emotions, telling stories on yourself about how you're doing, and modeling the language of how you're feeling and where you're at as you're navigating through these things in life. And then finally, to provide some structure with a visual schedule or something to show your kiddos, this is where we are, this is where we're going to go next, and then after that, we're going to do this, right? Just to give them a little bit of a handhold to know what's coming next in their day. So guys, I hope this has been helpful. I'm home, so I'm going to be rolling out a lot of content in the coming weeks, and I hope that you'll subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss any of it, and then also check out this video that'll teach you some ideas to think about as you're playing with your kiddos during this time. Guys, thanks for joining us here at Lingaroo, where language comes to life.